So I grew up in a home where church was consistent for most of my life, and in that we were all about missions. But missions was an offering that we took up. We wrote a check, and the good news is there was somebody on the other end of that check, and they were doing mission. And I do believe funding things is a part of mission, and we want to do those things. But so it was a conflicted time for me of understanding what mission really was. And I remember my dad around when I was in high school just really saying, we're going to live on mission. We're going to live that out. And I got to watch that with him. My dad was a construction worker, ran a company of a bunch of construction guys, and I watched him pour his life out. I remember the phone ringing at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and here's a guy who does construction work with him, and he's got issues with his girlfriend and all kind of crazy stories. And my dad's getting up at 1, 2 a.m. talking to these guys, shepherding them, if you will. And my dad's, just an everyday normal Christian who sits in the seat, sits in the pew, and hears the sermon. But he just made a conscious decision. We're going to be on mission. And so I got to watch my dad model that. And so then very quickly for me, it became, oh, wait, so mission's not just writing a check. Mission is us living with a gospel intentionality wherever we are. And my dad shepherded me in that. And so I started living that way kind of early on, still not fully walking, knowing Jesus in a real way as Lord, but trusting I'm supposed to talk about him, and so I'm just going to start doing that. I'm going to care for people, and I'm going to invest my life in people. And so my dad really was kind of the start of that, along with my mom, and watching them serve other people, and in that actually speak the gospel. My story is at 11, I went to this big evangelistic rally, and I felt like, man, I think I'm supposed to give my life to Jesus, but I was baptized when I was 5, so I'm a little bit confused. So my mom had a conversation about that, and in that conversation, I was like, I don't think I'm a Christian, Mom. So that was when I was 11. And so I prayed and said, Jesus, I'm a sinner and I need you. And I feel like something maybe took place, but when I was 19, freshman in college, there was a moment, I'm studying astronomy for school because it was apparently the easiest science I could take at the time as a business major. So I took that. But I just really got interested in reading my Bible. So I've got my Bible open. I'm reading about how personable God is, and I'm studying astronomy. And in the midst of those two things, I see how personal God is, but how huge he is. And God just broke me. And it was one of those, I'm not that emotional, became emotional in a moment. And it's like, who is this? What is this? And the Holy Spirit really started working. And so I call that moment in my life a grace awakening, if you will, where I really started to understand grace, that an unbelievably amazing, big God who's created this world actually cares about my soul. And so, yeah, I did mission before that moment in college where I really started to get the gospel. And so once I got the gospel, then living out mission became a whole new thing altogether. I grew up in a small southern town, 6,000 people, that honestly, even growing up, racism still existed and was still pretty prevalent. And my parents just never saw skin color. And so whereas some more prominent white families wouldn't have African-American friends over, we always did. And it was different. And so I remember that impacting me greatly. And so that was something distinctive that my parents did in a Southern culture where that, honestly, I grew up in, the 80s, that's even then, there was this tension, and my parents just never saw that. And I watched them care for people. My mom worked in the local school, and if there was somebody in need, she didn't go search out to find what agency could help them. My family just helped them. And so I got to watch my parents sacrifice and give in that way as well. And so we would do things like that consistently. And the thing that impacted me most is my parents were willing to do mission and not be seen for it. They didn't have to have recognition. They knew their identity, their worth, and their great reward was what they had in Jesus. And so that was huge. I think one of the hardest things about living on mission for people is time. And I think that's probably something everybody will get to. It's time. I don't have time for this. I'm so busy. Like, whose story is that not? Like, that's everybody's story now. I'm busy. I've got this. I go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And I think the the challenge of allowing them and giving them the picture that it's a part of the normal rhythm of life. I think maybe Jeff Vanderstelt says it this way: too often we look at mission as something that we add to our schedules, and maybe if God leads that way, go that way. But oftentimes it's intersection. It's a gospel intentionality wherever you are. So if your kids play sports, how can you have a gospel intentionality in that moment? And so, but I think the challenge is getting people to see mission as that, and not just something, well, I got to add this to this. I think another hard challenge has been in leading people is I watch people do it, and it's driven out of guilt and not an overflow of grace. And I think too often we're guilt-driven towards doing mission and thinking God's going to be happier, or we're going to, we're going to be blessed more because of that. Where the truth is, it should be generated out of the fact that God's already our reward, our identity, our worth, our value, and purpose is all in Him. And I think it's really hard for people to see that, especially I think oftentimes in a Southern culture where religion is so rampant and people want to do things in order to make God happy. We recently relocated to a new city, and being in Atlanta now, we just really said, man, we're going to make this a part of who we are. And because before I was a church planner, and we were so busy, like everybody says. But now I'm stepping in this new role, helping thousands of church planners, pastoring on the side at a church, speaking, writing. And so life just seemed like it even got busier when we got there. But we said, we're going to make this a part of who we are. 1 Thessalonians 2:8 just says, not only did we share with you the gospel of Jesus Christ, we share our lives with you as well. So we said, how do we share our lives with people that we're around and with every day? And so we started with our neighbors. And so we didn't know or have any friends at all when we moved to this new city. And so we said, we're not just going to make these neighbors our next project, we're going to make them our best friends. Like whatever we can do, as long as they're willing to go for that, we're going to do that. And that's what's happened. And so when I get home, depending what time it is, but let's say I get home at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, we've just made it a thing. It's culture now in our cul-de-sac in this neighborhood that we live in. You just come outside and the kids play and the adults hang out and talk. And that's 4 nights a week. And so we do that. It didn't happen that way from day one. So here's what we did. We just said, we're going to be really intentional when we hang out. We're not hanging out in our backyard. There's privacy fences everywhere with everybody, and that's what we do. We retreat to our backyards for a place of refuge. And I think too often we've seen the home as a place of refuge rather than a weapon for the gospel. And we say our home's going to be a place where we actually practice hospitality. And so we made our front yard the place, like my grill gets rolled around to the front, and we do it in the front. And so that's what we did early on. We got to eat. We do that every day. So why not do it with people who don't know Jesus and live next door to us? I recently read a study where more Americans know their neighbor's dog's name than they do their actual neighbor's names. And blew me away. And I said, we're going to know our neighbors' names. 40% of Americans know their neighbor's name. I was like, we're going to know every one of our neighbors' names. So we put a grill out and we started inviting people to eat, and we provided the food and we went for it. And now it's just who we are. And now they invite us. And so it's been, it literally is just, these are our neighbors. We've got to eat. And it's really convenient actually to eat at our house. So we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So that's what we do. But we just do it with people who don't know Jesus and live next door to us. Living on mission is about risk, and you try things. And so in our neighborhood, we often roll our grill out to the front of our house, and we grill and we invite all of our neighbors. So sure enough, a couple weeks in, we moved in the spring. Perfect time to cook out. And so we took it out there. We got all kind. I was like, I love grilling. I think it's like an art. So we're going to grill the best meat we can get. We're going to impress our neighbors. It's going to be awesome. We're going to invite them all. So we did. And we told them, y'all can bring stuff if you want, but let's just go for it together. Talking about our family being on mission together, my wife, she's like Pinterest queen, and so she made these cool little flyers that was just, really cool looking. And then my 4-year-old son was the he's got blonde hair, blue eyes. He's adorable. So he knocks on the door and hands a flyer to somebody. They open the door and take it. And we get to, serve as what I think is the greatest mission team ever. So it's a family effort for us in this. And we invite everybody, and sure enough, people show up. And this is kind of our first deal. We're in the neighborhood. We're going to be intentional. We're so excited. We got all kind of meat on the barbecuing and on the grill. And then neighbors straight across the street, they show up. And they're from Russia, which is awesome. We have Russian, Polish, just a lot of different demographics from different cultures represented. They show up, and they're Muslim. So cooking them pork on our grill was not the most strategic mission ever. Matter of fact, offensive. So they dropped off this amazing bread that they had baked for the party, and they left. And I looked at my wife and I was like, honey, why did they just drop food off and leave? So we had not gotten to know them because we had just moved in. And as we learned a couple of weeks later, they're Muslim. Serving a big barbecue dinner in most southern towns works great. And that's a great way to start mission. When your neighbor's a Muslim, it's not. And so we started off on the wrong foot with them. And so we really, really had to honestly work hard to get them to trust us again because we offended them. The redeeming factor in that is God is really gracious. And so their daughter just got married a few weeks ago, and we were invited to the wedding. Enormous, big win. We were the only people in the room who were American. Everything was spoken in Turkish, actually, at the wedding. We understood nothing. We sat at the table of honor, and it was amazing. And then, all of a sudden, they switched from Turkish to English for the first time. And they said, and now our honorable neighbors will speak. So I'm at a Muslim wedding, 600 people, and I went, oh wait, that's us. So I got up and I spoke at the Muslim wedding. And I said, in the name of Jesus, I didn't do that. And all of them came to Christ. It was great. No, so I got up and just said, blessings to you and your family. And then the next part of that was they said, now you will dance. And my wife and I danced to some 60s American song that their band tried to play. And it was the most embarrassing moment ever. So I think it was almost haha, remember when you served that barbecue? Now you're dancing in front of all of us. And they've become really, really good friends. And so it's been neat to see how God has redeemed that relationship. We learned a ton about, hey, maybe figure out who your neighbors are before you cook them a meal, because you could offend them. But I'd rather mess up trying than not do anything. My parents lived on mission, and they, never set us aside for the mission of God. They saw me and my sisters as mission, and they loved us well. They didn't force anything on us, but they taught us the Bible. They prayed for us. They loved on us. Exactly what you should do with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. That's what they did. They had a lot of grace for us. And so that was huge for me in my journey, to be able to look at them and see, wow, they have something I don't, and it has forever changed them. And I want in on that. That was huge for me. When I was in college, I was 19. I met a guy whose his name was Matt. Matt loved Jesus, pursued Jesus. When I got to college, I was in that place where it's like, I'm either going to pursue the party scene and go full out for that, or I'm going to pursue Jesus. I don't know which it's going to be, but I'm going to lead in either one, because I'm going to lead something. And so one night I would go to a rush party and have fun at that. And then the next night I would go to a Bible study. And then the next night, and I kind of was like on the A-B schedule, but not academically, socially, and kind of did that whole deal for a couple of weeks. And in that I met a guy named Matt, and Matt said, hey, you want to go hang out after this? There's a bunch of us going to watch movies and hang out. And I was like, sure, I'm a freshman. I don't know that many people. And he said, all those folks over there going, I looked and there were girls and I was a 19-year-old freshman in college. Like, yeah, that sounds great. And then after that, he said, hey, a bunch of us are going to get wings on Tuesday. Do you want to go get wings? Yeah, let's go get wings. And 2 years later, after hanging out with Matt, him talking about Jesus all the way through, him saying, hey, you ought to read this. And then I would read it because I respected him. 2 years later, I looked at him and said, you're discipling me. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, you didn't tell me. And he was like, I know. But he said, matter of fact, I'll tell you this. I discipled you. It's about time you actually go do the same thing with some others. And in that moment, it forever changed the trajectory of my life. And that's just what I've done. I've done what Matt did in my life. He discipled like 7 of us for 3 years of college. And because he was just a year older. And I mean, poured into us. And he's a graphic designer. He makes websites. That's what he does. And if you go and you tracked the 7 of us, all 7 are pastors, planters, and like collectively enormous ministries with great influence. And he makes websites, which is a phenomenal craft to have. But he makes websites for a living, but he spends his life making disciples. Like he's such a cool story.